So this lesson starts with decimals and fractions. Like I said, I don't like how the book teaches. Now, I'm going to ask you if something is a decimal or not. Ready? So, is 3/4 a decimal?
It can be.
No, it can be. Is 0.25 a decimal? Yes. Is 7/10 a decimal? It can be, Madison, correct. Now, the only one with a decimal has a decimal. Like that's kind of the requirement. Like it's got to have it, like that makes it a decimal. As Madison and Liam astutely brought up, they kind of are all decimals, but we need to do something to them. How can I make 3/4 into a decimal? How can I make 3/4? Actually, I'm not going to do that one because someone is test taking. Someone is test taking. Instead, we are going to do 2/4. How do I make 2/4 into a decimal? What do I do? How do I make it? I don't want you to just tell me what the decimal is. How do I make it, Fernando? I divide 2 by 4. Exactly. That's exactly what I do. I do my little long division where I have 2 on the inside, 4 on the outside. Can 4 go into 2? No. Becomes a 0. Don't forget, we do our decimals. We've divided like this before. How many times does 4 go into 20? How many times does 4 go into 20, Rocco? 5 times. We get 20. Hey, that's our answer. So what is the decimal form of 2/4? What's the decimal form of 2/4? Raise your hand, Lily. 0.5. What about this one? 7/10. 7/10. So we do that same thing. We divide 7 into 10 groups. And what's the answer, Michelle? 0.7. Exactly. Now, what about this one? What about the decimal that we already have? What can I do with that one if I wanted to make it look like the original other two? These ones are our fractions. And then these ones are decimals. Now I want to make 0.25 into a fraction. Now, I don't want you to tell me what the answer is. I want you to tell me how we would start this problem. How do we begin to make it a fraction? What is the fraction in its easiest form? Not most simplified, easiest form. Who can tell me? Jenna? 50. This one right here. It's okay. What is it? 25 1/100ths. Correct. That is it in its easiest, most basic, not simplified form. Now let's look at that again. 0.25 we know turned into 25/100. What about this one? What about 0.3? Does that turn into 3/100? No. What about 0.278? Does that turn into 278/100? No. Why does it not, Madison? Why does 0.3 not turn into 3/100?
Because 0.3 doesn't turn into 3/100 because it's not in 100th place.
Exactly. Because it's not in the 100th place. It's not in the 100th place. What place is that 3 in, Rocco? The 10th place. So what should the bottom of my fraction be, Michelle? 10. Exactly. What about this other one? 0.278. What should that be, Miles?
It should be 0.78 over 1,000.
Yes, over 1,000 because it's in the thousandth place. So as we know, we should already be familiar with all of the places to the left side of our decimal. We have our ones place, we have our tens place, our hundreds place, our thousands place. So that's how we keep going. Now there's our decimal right here. Now it's interesting to me, and it used to make me angry, but I've since gotten over it, that we don't have a oneths place, but whatever, I'll get over it. Gets on my nerves. But we have our next place is a tenths place. And you want to know something funny about the tenths place? Look at this one. This is 10. This is 0.1. Notice that they're the exact same but mirrored. Let's look at the next one. This one is 100 and this one is 0.01. Mind blown, right? Based on that, how would I say 0.6 in words? How would I say 0.6 in words? Let's see a new hand that I have. Hannah.
6/10.
Yeah. 6/10. Okay, Fernando, what about 0.45? Yeah. I'm not going to write it for, I am, I guess. 45 hundos. Awesome. And then Madison, what about this last one?
75,000.
Yeah, which I'm not going to write out, but I'm going to write out thousandths. Exactly. So, the important part is when we have our decimals, what's the key, part of the word that tells us we're dealing with a decimal? What's the key part, Rocco? Yeah, no, he's not wrong. It's the part. We can see it here. Hundredths, thousandths, tenths. Exactly. That is the noise that means we're dealing with decimals. Now we brought this up. These are our fractions in our pretty much most obvious, basic ways that we can do it. But does that mean I'm done? No, I'm not done. Now, one of these fractions I am done with. Who can tell me which fraction is all the way simplified? Roman.
All the way simplified is 3/10.
Yes, it is 3/10. And Hannah, how do we know that 3/10 is all the way simplified? I can't go any smaller. Can I divide them by the same number? When I divide something by the same number, what is that number called? Who can tell me when I divide something by the same number? Lucy? Greatest common factor. So exactly. Roman pointed out that 3/10 is fully simplified, and Hannah told us why we can't divide it, and Lucy told us it's because it doesn't have any greatest common factors. Remember when we were doing our greatest common factors, we did a lesson on that. That was chapter 1. When we did factors, all that happens is you look up what numbers multiply to a specific number. So for example, 12. The first always factors are 1 and itself. 1 and itself. What's the next factors? Who can tell me, Michelle? 2 and 6. What are the next factors, Anita? 3 and 4. Now, like I've told you before, notice how close 3 and 4 are. Is there any number between 3 and 4? No, that's it. We got all the factors. I like to write it in this descending order. Technically, it descends on this side and ascends on this side, but whatever. I like to do that because instead of having random places where you might miss one of the factors, where you might do things like that, it helps show you that you got them all. Exactly. But let's look back at this one. Let's look at 25 hundredths. 25 hundredths. My hint is always do the smallest number first and then see if any of the factors are in the bigger number. Because the bigger number, probably going to have more factors. So, what's the first factor set of 25? Miles?
1 and 25.
1 and 25. What's the second factor set? What's our second, Nathan?
5 and 5.
5 and 5. Hey, is there anything between 5 and 5? No. We got all the factors. Now, that means that 100 either has to have a factor of 25, a factor of 5, or we can't simplify it anymore. Let's think. Does 100 have a factor of 25? We're just skipping things. We're not even going to do it. 100. What's our factor of 25? 25 and, let's see. Raise our fingers. 25 and 4. Exactly. And look, that's already the bigger number. Do we have to keep going? Do I have to do all my factors for 100? No. It's a lot. That's why I start with the smallest number, because otherwise I've got 1, 100, 2, 50, 4, 25, 5, 20, and I'm not going on more. You see, it's annoying. So instead, all I had to do was that little amount of work. We always look at the factors of the smallest number, start with its biggest factor, and see if our bigger number has it. Excellent. So here we have 25. We have 25 over 100. We look at what our factors were. The 25's factor was 1, so the top becomes 1. The 100's factor was 4, so the bottom becomes 4. And what is our completely simplified fraction going to be then? 1/4. Awesome. Let's look at our next one. We had 278 over 100. Now, my other trick for 1,000, thank you, Madison. My other trick for this one, as I said in our factors lesson, sometimes I'm just too lazy. Sometimes I don't like 278. Who wants to find all the factors of 278? You want to find all the factors? The easiest thing I like to do is think of a number they both have in common. What's a number they both have in common, Michelle? 2. Exactly. We both know they have 2 in common. 1,000 divided by 2 is 500. 278, I like to split it up. 200 divided by 2 is 1. 78. 70 divided by 2 is 35. 8 divided by 2 is 4, so we get 39. So we get 139. Let's look at that number, 139. Does that look like we can simplify it more? Because I really don't think that we can. Maybe I'm wrong. So as we thought, just by looking at the number, it's prime. We know it's not even, so we can't divide by 2 anymore. And 139, I like to think of our simple base numbers to help us. We think of 2, we think of 3, we think of 4, we think of 5. Fun fact, if it is not divisible by both 2 and 3, it is not divisible by 6. If it is not divisible by both 2 and 3, it is not divisible by 6. And I'll get into that later. So we look at these base numbers. Not divisible by 2, not divisible by 3, not divisible by 4, not divisible by 5. We can take the chance and be like, yeah, okay, that's it. Exactly. So our fully simplified one is 139 over 500. 139 over 500. Now we know how to go from fractions to decimals. We even know how to go from decimals to fractions in a bit. Now, what we're going to do again is we're going to show a simpler way to write fractions as decimals. Let's look at this one. We have a fraction 9/12. To do it as a decimal, there's 2 different things we could do. We could simply long divide, which I highly recommend if you don't know your multiplication table very well. If you don't do that, practice on the side. We put our 9 on the inside because it is our dividend, and we put the 12 on the outside because it's our divisor, and then we're going to get our quotient. How many times does 12 go into 9? It doesn't. We do this. How many times does 12 go into 90? We have to keep doing this. I don't want to do that. But there's easier ways. Who can tell me an easier way that we might be able to do this? Madison.
We can find the...
Yes, we can simplify it and see how that helps us. What are both 9 and 12 divisible by? What are both 9 and 12? Roman?
3.
Both by 3. So we get 9 divided by 3 is 3. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Hey, look at that. 3/4. This should be one of our fractions that we have memorized into a decimal. I'm going to give you a list and I'm going to have you guys write it down. But regardless, the way to get something into a decimal, is making it over 100. How do I go from 4 to 100? Remember, we've done our ratio tables. We've done all of that. How do I go from 4 to 100, Rafi?
You do 4
times 25. So I just do the same at the top. Times 25. What's 3 times 25? What's 3, Trey? 75. So what would our decimal here be? If it's 75 over 100, our decimal, Lucy? Yeah, 0.75. Exactly. Now, what I want you guys to write down is this list of fractions that you should all know. Fractions to decimals. With these unit fractions, what is the decimal for 1/2? Who can tell me the decimal for 1/2? This is easy. Let's see, Elsie. 0.5. It's a little trickier. Who can tell me the decimal for 1/3? For 1/3, Rafi?
0.33.
Yeah, 0.33. But does that end there? No, we use, just like what we learned in our last lesson, bar notation. It goes on forever. What about 1/4? Who can tell me the decimal for 1/4 off the top of their head? Lucy. Yep, 0.25, 25 hundredths. Exactly. What about 1/5? Who can tell me 1/5? Rocco. Yeah, 0.2 or 0.20 or 20 hundredths or 2/10. Many different names. What about 1/10? Rafi. 0.10, 0.1, 0.10, 10 hundredths, 1/10, any sort of thing like that. That is what it is. Now, these are the base fractions that you should have memorized because they will help you. They will help you. These are unit fractions. Based on this, if I got something like 4/5, that means I multiplied this one by 4, so I multiply this one by 4. It really helps us learn when we know our base fraction. One more thing to go over. What about this? This is the fraction 7/2. What is this type of fraction called, Elsie? An improper fraction, right? What else can I do to that? What can I do to that improper fraction? What do I do to it? Lily? I can turn it into a kind of number. What kind of number? Nathan? A mixed number. What would the mixed number for 7/2 be? Raphael? 3 1/2. Exactly. 3 1/2. When we're finding the decimal form of that, the 3, that whole number, just stays. It's 3. And what's the decimal for 1/2, Anita? 5. So our decimal form of this is 3.5. That big number, our integer number, our whole number, that just always stays when we're making it as a decimal. So what I want you guys to do is do the guided practice on page 92. All you have to do is I want you to pick either 1, 2, or 3. Then you do 4, 5, or 6. And then you do 7 or 8. That is a total of 3 problems. Not hard. Homework is page 93, 94.